Alright, today we're going to think about dividing fractions. Now, there's a method for this that I'm sure some of you know that you've been taught, but we want to think very carefully about why it works and what exactly is happening when we divide fractions. Okay, so we're going to start not really by thinking about division, but we're going to start by revising what it means to subtract. Why that? Because just as division is the opposite of multiplying, which we know pretty well now from last time, so too subtraction is the opposite of adding. And so maybe by thinking about these opposites a little bit deeper, we can actually get a good idea about what dividing fractions means and what it should look like. Okay, so we'll start with a number line. We saw at the start of the year that if we take a positive number like 2, it means it's an arrow going right by 2. Okay, and when we change this to a, say, -2, then the arrow is going to flip, and every negative will just flip the arrow again, which is why two negatives put together like that give you a positive number. Now, that's what we started with, and then we started looking at what arithmetic looks like. For example, 6 plus 2, what would that look like? Well, if we look at just the number 6, that means you move right by 6. Then the number 2 means you move right by 2. The answer must be 8 then, and so we have a little 8 there. Now you could have seen that, of course, not by drawing arrows on a number line, but that helped us make our way around adding and subtracting negatives, right? Now, if we change that little plus there to a minus, then what it means is the blue arrow has to flip. And so actually, you've arrived at 4. So the answer is now 4. But what we also saw was that the subtraction was really just a shorthand for writing that rather than going 6 plus 2, we're actually doing 6 plus the negative of 2. Okay, and so we went 6 to the right and 2 to the left, which means we've actually added 6 to -2. Alright, and so we said that, well, actually plus 2 is moving right by 2, minus 2, -2 means the opposite, means move left by 2. Now, why did I bring that up? Because it gave us a way of not having to really think about subtraction. Subtraction really was nothing. 6 minus 2 just meant to add the opposite number. And thinking about the opposite number was really easy in this context, because if plussing 2 is moving right, the opposite of that means to move left. And so it gave us a way of just thinking about moving in different directions, and that helped us add and subtract negative numbers. Now that was way back, so I'm not going into full details of that right now, but I want to get you into the mindset of thinking about subtraction as just adding the opposite action. So to dividing by a fraction will be the same as multiplying by some sort of opposite. Now we've got to think carefully about what this opposite is, because in fractions and multiplication and division, we're working in multiplication world, right? In addition world, things are about moving right and moving left. In multiplication world, it's not about that anymore. And so we've got to think carefully about what's happening, and so we can think about the opposites in a clearer way. So that's where we're heading with this, right? And so we should think about, what does it even mean to multiply by a fraction? We learned how to do it last time, but what does it actually mean? Okay, so that's what we're thinking about now. So let's say we multiply by the number 2/3, this fraction 2 over 3. What does that mean? What does it do, right? Just as adding moves you to the right, what does multiplying by, say, a fraction do? So let's take a rectangle again. We'll work on this, and we'll say, we'll take one piece of the 2/3 at a time. The first thing we'll do is think about what the over 3 does. What does this actually do to the rectangle? Right. Well, what it means is you cut it into 3 bits, and so what I want you to think of happening to this rectangle is it gets sort of squished into this shape, where the size of this shape is such that it's like it's been cut into 3 bits. Okay, and so in some sense, that over 3 has squished you to 3 times smaller than you used to be. That's what over 3 does. It squishes things 3 times smaller. Same deal as cutting it into 3 bits and so on, but I want you to think of it now as a squish, right? That's what it does to a number, or does to a shape. It squishes it 3 times smaller. Now, what does the times 2 do? Well, we should then duplicate this, double it, right? And so the size of the new rectangle is such that 2 of those guys fit into there. And so the times 2, right, actually stretches things 2 times bigger. And that's what multiplying by a fraction does. That's what we mean when we say take 2/3 of something. The word of really means to multiply in this sort of context. And when we multiply by 2/3, what the 2 does, what the top number does, is it stretches things bigger. What the bottom number does is it squishes things smaller, right? So they're actually opposites of each other. The top number stretches things to make them, say, twice as big, whereas the bottom number, the 3 there, squishes things to be 3 times as small. Okay? And so that's what happens when you multiply a fraction. That's what happens when you multiply anything. It's actually about stretching and squishing. That's what's going on. Okay? All right, so what does it mean then to do the opposite of that? So let's take our number 2/3 again, right? We just said that the 2 and the 3 have a separate job, right? Now, what's the opposite of this fraction then? What would do the opposite action? So we want to think about the fraction that would be opposite, okay? Now, what does the 2 do? The 2 is a stretch. It means stretch things by 2, or stretch things to double their size, right? What does the 3 do? The 3 squishes things 3 times smaller, okay? And we want to reverse these things. We want to reverse them. We want to do the opposite of that. So rather than stretch things by 2, we should now squish things by 2, which means the number down the bottom should now actually be a 2. And so now rather than squishing things by 3, we want to stretch things by 3, make things 3 times as big now, rather than 3 times as small. And so the top number should actually become a 3. And so actually the opposite of a fraction in the world of multiplication is to flip the fraction. That's what the opposite is. Just as the opposite of a number in the adding world is to negative the number, the opposite of a number in multiplication world is to flip the number as a fraction. Okay, and we give a special name to this. When you flip a fraction, we call this the reciprocal of a fraction, and it's spelled like that, reciprocal. Okay, they're reciprocals of each other. And again, the important thing about flipping the fraction is that in the world of multiplication, that's how you think of opposites. Okay, just as in the world of addition, negative numbers are the opposites, in the world of multiplication, flipping the fraction is exactly what gives you opposites. Okay? And so that's going to give us a way to to divide fractions by multiplying, Okay? So just as subtracting is the opposite of adding, so for example, subtracting the number 4 is the same as adding the number -4 because they're opposites of each other, so too, dividing is the opposite of multiplying. So dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal because they're opposites. Okay, and at this point, you might want to pause this and write this down somewhere. Okay, so I want you to see that link between the subtracting and the dividing. Okay, so dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal, by its flipped fraction. Okay, and if we know how to multiply from last time, we can go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. We'll start, like last time, by dividing by a whole number. So say we do 3/5 divided by 2. Okay, I want you to start with this because rather than following the process, we can actually just think about what's happening, right? What does dividing by 2 mean? Well, dividing by 2 means we're actually squishing things to twice as small as they used to be, right? And so it's actually a squish. And with 3/5, well, what's the squish number there? 5, I think, is a number doing a squish. And so actually, the answer here will be to take your 3/5, and then the 2 goes to join the 5 down the bottom. And so actually, it becomes 3 over 5 times 2, which is just going to be 3 over 10. Okay, so I want you to think in terms of this sort of stretching and squishing. That's what the action of multiplying is, just as the action of adding and subtracting is moving back and forth. Okay, and that's going to be quite helpful for you, some of you a lot later as well. I won't spoil it, but it's going to be real helpful for some of you later. Okay, So what about when you have a fraction divided by another fraction? That's what most of us came for, I think. So say 3 over 8 divided by 2 over 5. Well, what does the action of dividing by 2 over 5 actually mean? Okay, well, it's the same as if we take our number 3 over 8 and we multiply by the opposite of 2 over 5. So dividing by 2 over 5 is the same as multiplying by the opposite of 2 over 5. How do you get the opposite? Well, you bring the 2 over 5 down and you flip it to 5 over 2. Okay? And so now it's just a multiplication question, which from last time we can do quite easily. If we just think about multiplying the top and the bottom, 3 5s become just 15, 8 2s become just 16, and that's how you divide. Okay, so dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the flipped fraction, so 2 over 5 flipped to 5 over 2, and then you just multiply as we did last time. Okay, so that's all for today. This is a bit tricky, so don't be too worried if it's a bit difficult at first, but have a watch again if you need to, but that's how you divide fractions. Thanks for watching. See you later.